Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. On this week's episode, I'll be speaking with convicted murderer Omar Warlick. On September 4th, 2002, the owner of the Beehive Lounge, Bryan Fortune, in Detroit, Michigan, was shot and killed during a robbery just before 6 a.m. According to the victim's girlfriend, two men entered the apartment through a door that leads to the roof after setting a ladder up and climbing onto the roof. She saw one man had a gun, but was unsure if the second man was armed. When the men entered the apartment, she ran out of the front door. As she was leaving, she heard two gunshots and called 911 from a gas station across the street. The police were on scene shortly after, and they found Omar hiding in the Beehive Lounge DJ's booth about 20 feet away from the murder weapon, which was a 9mm gun. Omar was arrested shortly after 6:30 a.m. Witnesses reported seeing a second man flee from the scene who was never caught, whom Omar refers to as Spoon. According to his statement, Spoon shot Bryan Fortune with a 9mm gun. Omar was charged with first-degree felony murder and was ultimately found guilty of first-degree felony murder, receiving a life sentence. Here's my interview with Omar Warlick.
Where were you born?
Detroit, Michigan.
What was your first positive memory as a child?
My first positive memory as a child, I would have to say that just being coddled by my mother. I can remember a Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Opening up presents, just feeling that nurturing spirit around the household with my mother.
What was your first negative memory as a child?
My first negative memory as a child, well, I think my earliest memory was probably building with my father. You know, we would have lessons around the house with mathematics, reading, the whole nine. And if I got anything wrong in my process of trying to figure it out as a child, I would get a thump, you know, and I was always a little frustrated with that, you know. And I would remember having this glance up at my father, and his remarks would be like, think. And it almost, kind of put me in a state of fear, you know, and a little bit of panic. Because if I didn't get the right answer, you know, what would be the outcome? So I think, yeah, that's probably my most, traumatic experience as a child that I can remember. It was actually learning with my father.
Did you suffer any childhood abuse or trauma?
Well, it depends on how we define abuse, you know, because if you look at discipline, you know, some levels of discipline can be, you know what I'm saying, characterized as abuse nowadays. You know, we come up under the scripture, you spare the rod, spoil the child. You know what I'm saying? So that was part of the upbringing. And I think a lot of that was a contributing factor of how our parents was raised and how slavery played a big factor in how black men were disciplined. You feel what I'm saying? So I think that, abuse came through spankings. Whooping is what we called it, you know what I'm saying, in our culture. And, if you did anything that was particularly wrong in the sight of your parents, you know, this state of, pedagogy came into play. You know what I'm saying? Whatever their rules were, this method of teaching that they instilled was with the belt, you know. So, yeah, I definitely remember spankings or whoopings, as we would call them.
What was your behavior like growing up, starting as early as you can remember?
My behavior was probably more or less like the average child. You know, I was curious. I ventured out a lot. You know, as a young child, I would get with a group of friends and we would ride our bikes through the neighborhood, just being adventurous and curious and explorative, you know what I'm saying, about what was going on around us, you know, as most children are, you know. And I think that the nature of learning or understanding right from wrong ultimately came from, you know, our parents, you know what I'm saying, in our surroundings. You know, you kind of did what your friends did, you know, and it was only class as being right or wrong based on the parent figure.
Are you gang affiliated, or have you ever been gang affiliated, whether that be prior to being locked up or since being locked up?
100%. I think that as a young man coming up, trying to find our way. By this time, my father was pretty much absent from the home, and I think the structure of having a father figure for a young man was crucial. During this time, maybe around the time of being uh, 10, 10 to like 13. He was in and out the house. By this time, drugs was permeate through the hood. You know what I'm saying? My parents were experimental. They came up in an era where heroin was a big factor. You know what I'm saying? Experimenting with pills was a big factor in the party scene, and marijuana. You know, and I think they kind of indulged. In that party scene, and it kind of affected, the upbringing that we had as children. I think during a period of time when my mother was really trying to, get her life together and get clean, my father was still struggling, and this created some conflict in the household. So I seen, bouts of abuse, so this played a factor as well, and yeah, it was crucial, around this time because my father figure was absent. He was a street guy to the extent of, he knew how to hustle. He was selling marijuana. He worked a job. He sold marijuana. And he had extramarital affairs. So yeah, I think that played a crucial role. With how I, perceived him. So it affected me and the process of, who I would hang out with. So as he began to be more absent, I began to get more involved in the streets. And I think I was kind of always looking for that father figure, that role model type, So we found it in one another. And little did I know, most of the men that we grew up around or hung around with, they were experiencing the same thing. So we all had something in common. So I think we just kind of found strength, most of the time where a young man finds strength in his father or, a male figure, that character was absent. So we found it in one another. And, yeah, we participate in, people call it a gang. Nowadays they use the terminology gang, but we used to call it crews when I was coming up. And, we hung together and it started out as, believe it or not, it started out with us really kind of just taking care of our neighborhood, looking out for one another, in our neighborhood. If Miss Lulu needed her grass cut, somebody would go down there and cut the grass, help her take her groceries in, and this was a big factor, and I don't think until maybe the crack era is when we start seeing a significant change in the neighborhood because a lot of our older friends who played the father figures, or the male role models in our community, they begin to become addicted. And when you start seeing this, you start losing hope. You start seeing like, wow, man, our male role models and, our prominent figures in our neighborhoods are, succumbing to drugs. And when you see that, you kind of just, get derailed. I came up in the 80s. I was born in 74, so I came up in the 80s. So Bloods and Crips. Now, I lived in L.A. and got a firsthand experience with Bloods and Crips, which is where a lot of that originated. So in the 80s in Detroit on the east side, it really wasn't, a lot of gang activity, in terms of Blood and Crips. It didn't even exist in Michigan, period. So what you had was a lot of street guys who had formulated like block crews. If you and I lived on the same street, we would be calling ourselves, if we stayed on Glenwood Street, we would call ourselves Glenwood whatever, or we would make up a name that fit us, our particular community. and we kind of, you know what I'm saying, moved like that. But no, it never really was blood and gang, you know, nothing like that.
What is the extent of your education?
Well, the extent of my education, I went to Kettering High School, and this was maybe ninth grade. Matter of fact, 10th grade, excuse me. And I was kind of troubled at that time. I got kicked out, got into a few altercations. I got kicked out and was sent to alternative school, like a night school, you know, saying to take classes. And really, by that time, man, I was just kind of like doing my own thing, you know. So I ultimately just left that alone. And my mother and I, we were like oil and water at that time, and we didn't see eye to eye. So she thought it would be best if I stayed out in California with with an uncle of mine. And this is where I started back to pick up my education. And this is where I got, you know, saying firsthand experience with going back to the gang situation with real Bloods and Crips, you know what I'm saying, out there. And I went to University High in LA, downtown Los Angeles. And it was a it was a culture shock, man. It was a different experience out there, you know what I'm saying? But I think the 11th grade was where I kind of, you know, dropped out and really kind of got engulfed in the streets. And I actually won a homecoming king, man. It was crazy. But I was pretty
Nice.
popular in high school.
Did you engage in any criminal activity as a juvenile?
Well, coming up, actually, I never got involved in burglaries, robberies until late in my teen years. I was more so involved with, you know what I'm saying, the drug selling, you know, as a matter of fact, I think I got my first sack of drugs from a friend of mine in the neighborhood. And this was maybe about, I want to say maybe about, it's about 88, 87, 88. And I remember getting a sack of drugs from him, and he gave me the numbers on what I was supposed to make off of it and what I was supposed to bring back. You know, and one of my biggest concerns, you know what I'm saying, while participating in this was that, you know, I would run into my mother because my mother, you know what I'm saying, was a recovering addict, you know, and I had my fears of if she relapsed, you know what I'm saying, and she came and copped and I would see my mother and everybody would know my secret that, you know what I'm saying, my mother used cocaine, you know what I'm saying, crack cocaine. And that being one of my biggest fears, you know, I kind of shielded that, you know, and I really was, you know, timid standing out on those corners, you know, selling drugs. But it was probably my first experience of selling drugs, and it lasted me, you know, up until maybe about 19.
Did you engage in any type of criminal activity as an adult prior to the case that landed you in prison?
Now this is a funny story, right? Because I ultimately had you know what I'm saying, after the drug selling, I've kind of, you know what I'm saying, by the age of 19, this is when I was kind of like making the decision, like, what is it that I'm going to do, you know? Because I had ended up going out to California for a while to go to school, and I became homesick, man. I would call home all the time, and my sister would tell me about a lot of the things that were going on with a few friends of mine that were getting shot, locked up, you know, just the conditions of what was going on in the neighborhood. And surprisingly, man, I was wanting to come home. Like, man, I miss my friends. Everything's going on. I'm not around. You know, so sometimes you feel like you're absent from those particular scenarios, but you kind of feel like if you were there, you could have prevented some of the things that may have happened. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of took on that state. And I remember dealing with a Belizean woman out in California. And, you know, we had a relationship, and she was older than I was. She was manager of an apartment complex in Long Beach. And we would go out there from time to time. My cousin and I, who lived in California, was going to Santa Monica and ended up going to Berkeley University later on. And when he and I would go out there, he was talking to one of her friends, and to make a long story short, I would kind of always, comfort her, talk to her. I was like her young little, boy toy, if you want to call it, because she was older than I was. And, she bought me a plane ticket. I ultimately told her, like, hey, listen, I need to get to Detroit. At this time I had a girlfriend as well that lived in Detroit, and she had a son. That wasn't mine, but she had a son, and I took care of him like he was my own. But I was like, I need to get to Detroit. I want to see my okay. I need to get to Detroit, and sorry about that. It was an officer just asking me about something. But I was like, I need to get to Detroit to kind of, figure out my situation. I had some things going on. I wanted to see my family. For Christmas was coming up. I wanted to see my family for Christmas. So she ultimately bought a round trip plane ticket to come back to Detroit. And when I came back to Detroit, I remember going to my girlfriend's house, and I stayed there for a while. Went home. My mother was not happy at all. I came back to the city, and I remember just she was just so upset about it, and she felt like I might ultimately try to stay, which ended up happening, and her and I kind of fell off track, after that, because she was like, hey, listen, I know you're here, you will see your girlfriend, you come back, make sure you get back to California, this and that. So I would come by to see her, and end up staying over for Christmas. And when she took me to the airport, I left. I left her in the airport, and I remember them calling me on the PA, and, it was like, report to terminal. And I was in the bathroom like, man, I really do not want to go back to California, because I was missing everything that was happening in the streets and the city. And I had a friend of mine to come pick me up from Metro Airport, and we went back to the neighborhood, and he couldn't believe that I had left my mother in the airport, and just ditched her to stay back in the city. So I had to find a place to stay, and I ended up staying with my baby mama for a while. She ended up, the girl that I was with that I came back for, who had the son, ultimately became, one of my children's mother. But I stayed with her for a few days until I kind of cleared things up with my mother. And once I did that, I was back in action. I was back out on the streets. I was back connecting with my friends, catching up on everything that I had missed. And I think, the whole neighborhood, the whole process of our neighborhood, what was going on in it, the trajectory of our lives, man, it just was like, it was just so much, pressed upon us, because nobody had male role models. I think most of my friends that I came up with, we all had mothers, and the autocracy of what we went through, from our mothers, man. We was trying to get from up under those regimes, and we kind of rebelled, We were trying to find ourselves out here in the streets. What was it like to be, a man? And we were learning those things in the streets, and, the criminal behavior came with it. It permeates through our neighborhoods. So, of course, young black men particularly will succumb to the environments that's, ultimately around them. I think in most cases, the only way that a child has a sense of being developed or learning himself is through the relationships that he has with other people. So ultimately, we became each other's crutch, but it was like the blind leading the blind because of the conditions of our neighborhoods. The social structure was destroyed due to the crack era. Now, we didn't bring crack into our neighborhoods. Ultimately, this was a hierarchy structure that was, bigger than us. And we didn't know these things at the time, but because of that, It took away our male role models that succumbed to drugs, that succumbed to criminal activity. And it when criminal activity, because of drug permeates the neighborhood, then you begin to see the social structure change. Now, education, is being taken away. The lack of funding in these communities because we were throwaways. This began to play a factor. So all our decisions were predicated and rooted off the things that were done in our neighborhood by systemic racism, if you want to call it that. But it was a crucial impact on what we did and what I did in the neighborhood and how my group of friends uh, fell suit.
Let's talk about the crime you are currently in prison for. You are convicted of felony murder stemming from a September 4th, 2002 robbery murder in Detroit. Can you walk me through everything that led up to the robbery and murder?
Well, uh, to talk about that without incriminating myself, any more than what I am incriminated and charged with, I would have to say that, when we deal with felony murder, let's first understand. I want to make it clear that, I don't condone violence in the sense that, you know, senseless crimes, but understanding the circumstances that created the condition of crime in our neighborhoods, and hopelessness, this is what we resort to without the proper structure and, infrastructures and programming, this is what our neighborhoods have been conditioned to. And understanding that Michigan, with the felony murder, I was convicted as an aider and abettor, but because of the underlying felony.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Because of the underlying felony that was committed, ultimately I was charged with murder like the principal party, even though I didn't pull the trigger. The gun was dismissed in my case, and this particular practice in California, they had abolished this. This particular practice had been deemed unconstitutional, archaic, and barbaric, to hold men under a death sentence just based on something that you did, coming into a situation because of a decision that you made. I ultimately had to pay the price, and it's not to say that I'm exempt from being wrong, and committing a crime. But, however, men do not need to be sentenced to death. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person commits the murder. They can convict you of the underlying felony itself and attach the murder to it. Now, this has been deemed as unconstitutional, archaic, and barbaric. And California has been one of the pioneer states to step in front of this thing and abolish the whole felony murder rule. And they let maybe about 400 people out that were convicted under the felony murder rule. In Michigan, we have a case, Wright and Aaron. And these particular cases created a standard where by way of these two people getting out because they couldn't allow the person's intent to do the underlying felony to be tied in with the murder. And if you look up those particular cases, it'll give you the whole rundown on what happened in the scenario of the case, similar to mine, where we went into a place, particularly to go in and rob the place. And in the commission of that robbery, a friend, of mine had got carried away, and I think he panicked in that moment, and he ultimately pulled out a gun and shot the guy. So because of that, because of that tragic night and that incident, I'm sitting here with a light bit, and he didn't even get convicted, or tried on this particular case. And because I wouldn't, get this particular person up, they took it even harder on me, So Michigan is definitely one of the places where if you get caught up in a crime like this, you're gonna do the time. And I've been in here going on 20 years, for something that I think that could be looked at and reconsidered. Being the person that I was that committed that act, I'm definitely not the same man that I was when I came in here. I think that the process of aging out of crime needs to be looked at. I think it needs to be more programs implemented, and Michigan is definitely not one of those places that has a lot of programming. So, excuse me, when you're in here, you're basically kind of fending for yourself. You got to find your way. If you want to get, yourself in a better situation, a better state of mind, then you got to create programs. And this is what myself and a group of other individuals have done through the process of, certain administrations. Every prison is not the same. So depending on where you're at, you can possibly get the type of programming you need. I think with everything in light of this pandemic, I think it's brought a lot of awareness and a new consciousness has been kind of awakened in people in terms of criminal justice reform. We have an organization called Steps to Life. We deal with the Prisoner Project, which is another organization as well. These both are spearheaded by Aldina Goodspeed and Dion Reaganil, and these people are just phenomenal, a phenomenal contribution to the community and a big asset to guys who are trying to transition from their ways in prison and making it outside in the real world. But I think we have to start looking at, the punitive nature of the American system. And I'm speaking particularly about Michigan. It's so punitive to the degree where, there's no chance for reform. We talk about prison reform, we hear prison reform, but is it really, an opportunity for real reform when it comes to Michigan State prisons? And I just don't think so. At this moment, unless you have outside organizations like the ones I just named. If you don't involve yourself or reach out and contact some of these organizations, you're bound to be doing 20, 30, 40 years on your bunk with no chance and hope for true reform and rehabilitation. And because it's so punitive, I think, and there being no incentives, it gives guys a motive to say, hey, man, I'm going to just, be exactly who I was when I came in here. There's no real hope for change, so people don't change, So I think that needs to be addressed, in Michigan prisons. But we got a lot of advocacy groups out there that's working on behalf, of prisoners like myself, who's trying to get out and make a contribution to society and right the wrongs that they did, because we're all more than the worst things we've done, I think based on the circumstances and the conditions of our communities, particularly black communities, it kind of escalates, and heightens, the nature of crime in our neighborhoods, and the hierarchy structure needs to be taken to look at. These are systems that have been put in place to kind of create a condition that will produce exactly what you see in school to prison pipelines. We got poor educational system, and when you got a poor education, you lack the ability to get a job, and jobs can't be created in the community where there's poor education. And anytime you have a job, then crime is the ultimate result. Look at these types of things and start making a conscious effort into changing it. To these laws that are locking people up, and it's costing taxpayers billions of dollars.
After being arrested, you're charged with first-degree murder, and you're ultimately convicted of felony murder, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Receiving a life without the possibility of parole sentence. How did you feel when you were handed down your sentence?
I think I was traumatized. I kind of was traumatized, and I was a bit naive in terms of how the system works, how biased and Oh, I thought they would really look at the preponderance of the evidence, convict me of the crime in which I admit. You know what I'm saying? I admitted to the underlying felony, and ultimately not with something that someone else did. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I had an out of body experience. I was married at the time. I got married, and I was married before I came to prison, and what I'm saying, it was a traumatizing experience on my family. And I'm sure it was very traumatic on the victim's family as well. I don't want to bring all the attention on me in the sense that what I'm saying, I think that this should be done. What I'm saying, without recognizing what I'm saying, the horror of what was done and the victim's family. But yeah, it definitely was a traumatic experience for both sides, for my family and the victim's family. You have a sense of regret. I think what I'm saying, your humanity kicks in, and you really think like, what I'm saying, wow, not only did I impact myself, my family, but you absolutely 100% devastated someone else's family. So yeah, it's traumatic, and I think that being in this experience, you kind of learn uh, empathy. What I'm saying, and showing remorse. What I'm saying, for some of the things you did. And when you look at a lot of these young guys, I'm 47 now. When I look at a lot of these young guys coming in, I see the old me, or that young guy that I was, without the guidance, what I'm saying, and the proper nurturing, what I'm saying, and I see a lot of that in them, what I'm saying. So I try to address it, what I'm saying, and check those behaviors. And I think that we all are a product of our environments, and we all mirror, what I'm saying, the caregivers or parent figures or role models of our neighborhoods. We all mirror those things, what I'm saying. And if we don't have that in the neighborhoods, then what we ultimately become is a product of criminality.
You've been incarcerated going on 11 years now. What does an average day consist of for you?
What average day consists of, like reading and understanding and learning law, what I'm saying, organizing, planning, what I'm saying, strategizing. Like I said, I build with advocacy groups like Steps to Life Incorporated, Prisoners Doing the Right Thing, and the Prisoner Project. A lot of these advocacy groups I've reached out to, and they respond well. And I try to be a part and create solutions to just make amends for some of the things that I did and right the wrongs. So we've created curriculums. We got a prevention program. What I'm saying, that we created in here, and we send out to these organizations, and they put it into practice, man. So it's just steady building and constant reforming. You know.
What does your behavior record look like during your incarceration?
Well, my behavior record over the years has definitely been it's been a little spotted. When I first came in, you come into the prison with a sense of, I got to protect myself, a fear of the unknown. So you kind of finding your way. And I had a couple of bumps and bruises along the way. But for the most part, I came in with guys that were kind of focused on getting out. So we stayed in the law libraries, what I'm saying, finding ways to kind of, what I'm saying, get around these sentences and make some type of difference. So I had a few bumps and bruises here and there, petty fights, what I'm saying, with uh, disagreements over, playing basketball. So that was one of the things. Hey, stay off the basketball court, you stay off the gambling tables, and you'll be fine. So I kind of avoided a lot of those things, but you'll find yourself being challenged with different personality types. Because you got to understand, man, a lot of these people in here are people that we've seen on the news, and a lot of these people deal with mental health issues that haven't been addressed. And I'm around these people every day, so I have to navigate through all that. So absolutely, you're going to run into some form of conflict here and there, but it's all about the manner in which you handle it. So I haven't had too many run-ins, but the ones I did have, hey man, we lived through those experiences and we've grown from them.
Have you taken any type of rehabilitative classes or continued your education since being locked up?
Well, 100%. I've taken just about anything that they will offer, but you have to understand when you're faced with a natural life bit, it's not anything that they try to offer you in terms of rehabilitation when it comes to Michigan prisons. And this is one of the things that I was trying to point out, that you have to get on the path of building self, and reading things, what I'm saying, on your own, and creating curriculums and bringing it to administrations like, hey, can we approve these programs? Like I said, depending on where you are, what I'm saying, you can have a winning shot. But for the most part, when you're faced with a sentence like mine, it's nothing that's available to you. You have to create for yourself, and you have to reach out to these outreach groups and organizations on the outside, what I'm saying, that will help you out. But other than that, it's definitely a hard situation.
Before we conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
It's been a pleasure. I don't know if I'll be able to call back, but it's been a pleasure, what I'm saying, sharing with you and talking about some of the things that Michigan prison may need to change, and this punitive state that we live in, and hopefully we can find a better way, what I'm saying, in doing things.
That was my interview with Omar Warlick. Thank you for listening.